When should you sell your land subdivision? That's a good question. We get asked on a fairly regular basis. We work with landowners that have parcels they can subdivide. Most of these folks aren't professional land developers. That's part of the market that we serve. You know, we're helping people that maybe haven't been through the land subdivision process before. And so in theory, I put that in quotes for my foster son Marty, one of his favorite sayings. In theory, they have a parcel they can subdivide. And so one of the things we have to talk to them about is, you know, how far along do they want to carry the subdivision process? When do you want to exit? When do you want to sell your property? When in the subdivision process do you want to sell your property? And that's important because there's a trade-off there between the level of risk and the level of reward or profit. So the longer you stay in the process, the more risk there is, the more work you have to do, but the more payoff there is at the end. The earlier you get out of the process, the less profit there is, but the more certainty there is. And so every client's different. They have different financial circumstances. They have different levels of risk tolerance. And so this is just a conversation that we have with folks just to find out what works good for them. And so what I want to do is talk about the 7 different kind of exit ramps in the subdivision process for landowners, and just talk about what those are, so you can help you decide how long do I want to be involved. You know, how long do I want to deal with Landon and his team of real estate consultant cronies, right? It's a good question. So I'm going to rattle them off. There's 7. Okay, here's the first one. You can exit before there is a tentative map, but after you've confirmed there's a subdivision. So you may think you have a parcel you can subdivide, but you don't really know until you have a professional go in, look at your property, examine some of the land records, take a look at the zoning, the specific plan, the general plan, get familiar with the local agency's subdivision process and requirements. And there's some footwork there you can do. Maybe you do that initial footwork, confirm with some degree of certainty that you've got a parcel that can actually be subdivided, and you're just going to sell to somebody that wants to deal with the rest of the subdivision process. That's kind of the earliest exit, and some people will hire us to do that. So we just kind of go in and do some due diligence work, and sometimes we get hired not by the seller but by the buyer. So we got a buyer that's thinking about buying a parcel. The real estate agent, the seller's agent, has told them it can be subdivided. They call us and say, hey, you know, we want to make sure that's really true. And so we'll go in and take a look at it. The second exit point is after the tentative map has been completed, but before you've met the conditions of approval. I would say that's probably the most common exit point in the list of 7 that we find owners taking. So we'll come on board, we'll confirm that they can actually do a subdivision, which I talked about, and then we'll help them get through the tentative map process. So that's where I've got other videos that talk about tentative maps, but it's where you submit your proposed plan of subdivision to the local agency, and then they issue you what's called conditions of approval. So they say, we'll let you subdivide, but you're going to have to do these things. So that's typically the most common exit point. Somebody will get a tentative map approved, but they don't want to go through all the work of meeting the conditions of approval. They'll sell to a developer that will do that. The third exit is after the tentative map is complete and after the conditions have been met, but before the final map is filed. That's not super common, but in theory, my favorite, foster son's favorite term again, in theory, an owner could do that. So you could go in, get your approved tentative subdivision map. You could go in and meet the conditions, so you could put in the sidewalks and the sewer and the water line and do the landscaping. And then you could sell somebody that parcel ready to go to final map. Okay, now it seems silly. Why would you do that? Well, it may be that you've got some different phasing options and maybe even some different possible configurations on the final map based on the tentative map. So you've still got some flexibility, some wiggle room, and you're going to sell that so that the person doing the final map can make the ultimate decision on how they want to do that. So you may not want to finish the final map because you want to leave that flexibility to the person that's going to be buying the property in the potential subdivision. You could exit after the final map is complete, but before the building permits are issued. Again, this is probably the second most common exit point we find. So somebody will go all the way through the final map process. So they'll actually do the paper subdivision and create the lots. Maybe we even set monuments, but they don't want to do any of the work to get the building permit. That's important because there's kind of two primary places the agency can condition your development. One is at the approval of the final map, and then the other is at the building permit. So And we always, for practical reasons, try and push the conditions of development onto the building permit, because it just makes more sense and it provides more flexibility for the landowner. And so in that scenario, a lot of owners say, hey, I've done some of this work, but I don't want to deal with the bulk of the conditions that are going to come on the building permits. The subdivision's complete. I'm going to sell this now to a developer. And a lot of developers like that because they just want to go in and they only want to deal with the building permit and the construction. They don't want to deal with all the land use planning, zoning, entitlements, studies, all that stuff. So it works out. Sometimes that works out. So that's the second most common exit point there, after the final map is finished, but before the building permits are pulled. Another one is, this is number 5, is after the building permits are pulled. So you go in and do some of the entitlement work to meet some more of those conditions to get the building permits, but before construction. It's not super common. Typically that's somebody that is walking that project all the way through building permit, but then selling to a builder, and all the builder wants to do is go in and he wants everything entitled. He or she just wants to go in and build. And then almost finally, this number 6 is after construction. So you do the whole thing. You do the tentative map, you do the final map, you meet all the conditions to get the building permits, you pull the building permits, and then you build. Okay, some owners do that. They walk it all the way through construction. They get all the way done with construction, and then they sell the new parcels with the building on them, right? And a lot of owners do that. A lot of profit in that, right? If you can tolerate the risk. And then finally, the 7th is it's not really an exit point, but some people never exit. So they go all the way through that process I just described, and then after things are built, they don't sell, they rent or lease. So they're going to be in the property management business. Lots of companies do that. So that's another option. So there you go. There are the 7 exits, potential exit points from a land subdivision process. Talked a little bit about why people would do that. We're not going to answer it in this video, but I'll do another video. We'll talk about how do you choose. So depending on your circumstances, how do you decide when to exit? And we'll talk about maybe some different scenarios. I'll describe some potential subdividers there, and we'll tell you when those people might exit. And then what do you need to do for each phase? So if you're trying to decide, do I take this subdivision through the next phase? We'll walk through what are the risks and the level of effort involved. So we help you guys decide what kind of developer you want to be, how long you want to stay in the saddle. All right, cool. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it.